Halo Infinite's multiplayer beta has now been out for a little over 2 weeks, and with the campaign right around the corner, I figured this would be as good a time as any to kind of check all the numbers and see how Halo Infinite has performed. So in this video, we're going to go over everything kind of performance related to Halo Infinite. Obviously, these are just numbers in isolation. This isn't the end all be all. If you've been kind of in tune to Halo Infinite, you'll know most people are very pleased with the gameplay, less so with the progression and cosmetic system, but at the end of the day, 343 has done a good job with the gameplay of Halo Infinite, and that's something I'm definitely on board with. I've been absolutely loving playing the game. Now that said, the first thing we're going to start with here is actually some review scores that came out for Halo Infinite's multiplayer only. I just want to show these because I want to compare them to some of the big games that came out this year that are kind of competition for Halo Infinite. Now I would be the first one to tell you review scores are pretty crap. I really don't put much stock into them, but they are kind of just interesting to see, keep in the back of your head, and just kind of roughly know how reviewers are kind of reviewing Halo Infinite. Like I said, Halo Infinite's multiplayer, since it's in a beta and it is only the multiplayer, a lot of sites still haven't reviewed it, or if they have, they haven't put a score to it, and it's not on Metacritic yet since the full game isn't out. Now that said, IGN has done a review where they gave it a 9 out of 10, and GameSpot did a review where they gave it an 8 out of 10. You can go read their reviews and kind of get all the details, but for the most part, it talks about how the gameplay and stuff is really good and everything like that, and maybe they kind of knock some points down for the progression system or the cosmetic system. Now in comparison, as you can see here, Call of Duty Vanguard, which obviously is one of the main competitors that came out this year, is performing in the 70s, and Battlefield 2042 is performing in the mid to upper 60s, depending on which platform's reviews you're looking at over on Metacritic. So obviously this isn't a victory we can ride home with yet because the campaign hasn't come out yet, and while murmurs of the campaign being pretty good are out there, until it's out into the public's hand, we really don't know, but it does seem like Halo Infinite most likely is going to review a lot better than its competition this year. Moving on to something that has a little bit more substance to it, in my opinion, we're going to talk about the player base, not only on PC, but also on Xbox, because obviously Halo is a very big game on Xbox. So one thing to keep in mind with Halo Infinite is Halo is still a game heavily played in North America. When you're looking at population charts or you're looking up top played games, you do have to look them up for peak time in North America, otherwise Halo will be much lower, and you can easily see that in the Steam charts as it peaks every night NA time, but does obviously plummet pretty far when NA's player base is a bit lower. So the first thing here that I want to talk about is Steam's most played games, and this is from Steam themselves, and this is the top game by current player count. You can also see the peak player count today. Looking at this about 9 p.m. Central Time, which obviously is going to be higher up for the NA time zone, Halo Infinite is currently the third most played game on Steam. Now if you look at peak players today, it sits at about 6, below things like Apex and PUBG and New World that peaked at different times throughout the day. Now at the end of the day, I still think that's pretty good for a Halo game on PC, as Halo, while it has been on PC in the past, definitely isn't a household name on PC like things like CSGO and Dota 2, and even more recently things like Apex Legends. When you look at the Steam chart alone for Halo Infinite, like I said, you can see the kind of peaks and valleys as it goes through, kind of according to the NA time zone, but what you can see is there is a slight decrease since the game launched a few weeks ago. The first day peaked at about 272,000 players, and lately we have been peaking closer and closer to 125k players. Now while some people on Twitter are kind of already giving this the doom and gloom, this is pretty normal for a new game. Usually after a game comes out and it isn't brand new and it doesn't have everyone jumping in to try it, it is going to lose some of those initial players, as those players had no plans to stick around. They were just kind of checking it out. Especially with Halo Infinite being free, it's even more reason for people to hop in on the first few days and then maybe not check back in. Overall though, I do think that Halo Infinite is holding its player base pretty well, and I think there's a good chance that on Steam alone, we could see Halo Infinite holding in the 80 to 100k peak range every single day, and that's not even counting campaign. Once you add in the campaign here, it could be a whole different ball game, because the campaign is going to hold the attention of a totally different section of Halo fans than the multiplayer currently does. While there is definitely kind of crossover between campaign and multiplayer in the Halo fan base, there are people that are primarily campaign players, and there are definitely people that mostly play the multiplayer. So I'm really interested to see kind of where these numbers end up after the campaign comes out, and that's why I wanted to do this video before the campaign came out, so maybe we can do this video again and compare a few weeks after the campaign. Now unlike Steam, which shares these numbers publicly, Xbox kind of obfuscates them a bit, but you can go on their website and see the most played games. There's no numbers to this, but you can just see a raw list of the most played games on Xbox. And so here you can see, Fortnite number 1, Warzone number 2, and then Halo Infinite number number 3, which again, I'm looking at this during peak NA hours, but this is pretty solid for Halo Infinite to be right after Fortnite and Warzone. There were reports after the launch that for a little bit Halo Infinite was even number 1 on Xbox, which is pretty cool. I think something important to see here is that Halo Infinite currently on Xbox is above things like Apex Legends and above things like Forza, even though something like Forza is way down the list on Steam. Forza Horizon 5 on Steam is only getting about 20k players a day, so even on Xbox where it's much more popular, Halo still currently has it beat, which I think is a pretty good sign. Same with even Call of Duty Vanguard and Roblox, which is definitely a huge game on Xbox, and Minecraft and even Siege and everything like that. Halo is performing very well on Xbox. Obviously, it being free to play definitely helps with that, as now it can directly compete with things like Warzone and Fortnite and Apex Legends. Moving on, I did want to talk a little bit about Twitch numbers. Now, Twitch numbers don't mean nearly as much as player-based numbers, but you can kind of look here at the overall Twitch numbers for Halo Infinite. So depending on the time of day, if you look during the middle of the workday in NA, Halo Infinite won't be very high in the Twitch category, but if you look on any given night, it's most likely going to be somewhere toward the back end of the first row or the second row, which I think is pretty decent. Halo has actually never really been a game that has done overly well on Twitch. I remember even right after Halo 5 first came out, it had already plummeted through the Twitch directory, so it's nice to see Halo Infinite kind of holding strong a little bit here and hanging out toward the top. Obviously, during bigger events or when a bigger streamer hops into Halo Infinite, the numbers kind of inflate a bit, but even some of the more native Halo streamers, although I don't know if you'd necessarily consider some people like Sniped native, since a lot of his fan base comes from Apex, and even those guys are getting pretty good numbers on Halo Infinite, and that's good to see. If you look at the chart here, I would say over the past week or so, it's kind of still peaking around the same thing every day, other than obviously occasional higher peaks when a bigger streamer hops into Halo Infinite. And last but not least, I just want to talk about Google Trends, because I think this is kind of something pretty interesting. So if you look up Google Trends for just Halo since 2004, you can obviously see here, you know, the first peak is Halo 2, the second peak is Halo 3, then the slightly smaller peaks after that are Reach and 4, and then there's really small peaks for like MCC and H5, and then MCC PC. And as you can see, Halo Infinite is the highest Halo has been trending on Google Trends since about 2014, which is definitely good to see. Now, while that does show something, I think what is something that is cooler to see is if you compare Halo on Google Trends directly to some of those key free-to-play competitors. So here I pulled up Warzone, Fortnite, and Apex Legends. As you can see here, this time I just did it over the past year. Obviously, going into the launch, it wasn't going to be as high, but what's actually pretty interesting is that even before the multiplayer beta had dropped, Halo was already trending above Warzone and Apex Legends, just purely off of kind of hype for the game. Once it dropped though, as you can see, we got that nice peak, and then it's kind of starting to come back down a little bit to reality, but even currently, it's still above Fortnite. Now, I know there is the new big Fortnite event coming up, and Warzone constantly has new events, so I'm sure this will fluctuate over time, but I think it's cool to see that Halo currently on Google Trends is performing better than its key free-to-play competitors, Warzone, Fortnite, and Apex Legends. Like I said earlier, once the campaign comes out, that's going to throw a whole new wrench into this, because those games don't have the huge fan base dedicated to the story and the campaign for those games like Halo does. Obviously, Call of Duty has a campaign with every game having campaigns, but the Call of Duty campaigns don't have nearly the same kind of depth and love for them that the Halo franchise does. Anyways, guys, that's going to do it for the video. I hope you found this interesting, just to kind of look at all the statistics for Halo Infinite and just kind of see how it's performing against other games in the FPS space, or just shooters in general, or even on Steam, comparing it to things like Dota 2 and New World, and even other games like Grand Theft Auto. If you guys enjoyed the video, you know what to do. Make sure you guys follow me over on Twitch. I stream Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays, and I'd also appreciate it if you follow me over on Twitter and Instagram. I do giveaways, tweet my thoughts, post cool pictures, and all sorts of goodies. And with that said, I'll see you all next time.